All right, everybody. Welcome back to whatever this is with Hawk, with your host, Hawk. That's me. This is the stuff the videos that we make exclusively for our YouTube page. I read a lot. I read a lot of news. I read a lot of articles. I read a lot of different writers. I read a lot of different websites. One of the websites that I read on a daily basis, ironically enough, is a website called the Daily Kos, DAILYKOS.com. One of the things that I appreciate about that website is that most of its users, or a lot of its users, participate in writing the content that appears on that site. And so there's a pretty big investment on the part of the community of people who read that site on a regular basis to contribute to it and participate in the things that are going on that site. And so today I'm going to read through an article by one of their community members, a guy named Dr. Beast 68. Although I guess I shouldn't assume Dr. Beast is male. They wrote an article, the title of which really hit home with me, and then I read through it, and it's really good, and I want to share it with you guys. The title of the article is "There Must Come a Reckoning for Our Media." And this article was published a couple of days ago on Thursday, October 24th. I'm recording this on Sunday, October 27th. And I saw that title, and I was like, holy shitballs, man. No doubt. And the opening image of the article, I'll try to share this, is a tweet from a woman named Leah McElrath. And she writes in all caps, "Not one major newspaper ran with the Trump is a fascist story on the front page." 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 front pages from the Washington Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, Miami Herald, New York Times, Washington Times, Kansas City Star, Los Angeles Times, Boston Globe, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Chicago Sun-Times, and the Idaho Statesman. And this was about a story earlier this week where Donald Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, former Marine General John Kelly, whose son gave his life in combat, gave a couple of interviews where he said that Donald Trump admired Adolf Hitler. Donald Trump said, "I wished my generals could have been more like Hitler's." And he said that Adolf Hitler had actually done some good things. Not one single major newspaper in the United States ran that story on its front page. Not one. Even the New York Times, who he spoke with the day after the Atlantic first published this information, and they had audio recordings. He sat down with their reporters and spoke on record, recorded audibly. Not even the New York Times ran that on their front page. You know, it's like I talk about CNN, I talk about Fox News, MSNBC, the networks, and how they've given Trump a pass on so many levels for so long. And, you know, Van Jones was on CNN earlier this week, and he made the comment that Kamala Harris has to be flawless, while Donald Trump gets to be lawless. And which I thought was kind of a kitschy, slogan-ish kind of thing to say, but it's really accurate. It's really accurate. And I think that's typified by people, you know, like Brett Stevens, one of the opinion columnists for the New York Times, you know, who wrote this tortured fucking editorial that, you know, Kamala Harris just hasn't earned my vote yet. He's fully aware that Donald Trump is a fascist who's going to implement an authoritarian regime in the United States of America, but he just wasn't quite sold yet on Kamala Harris being the only other alternative to an authoritarian theocracy with a dictator who's going to use the United States military and the power of the federal government against American citizens with whom he disagrees. And I think we're at a point where our media is doing a tremendous disservice to all of us. And that's what this article is about. So I'm going to read some sections of it and talk about it a little bit. In 2 weeks, Americans will decide whether the United States will continue as a representative democracy and the shining beacon on the hill of freedom and liberty, or will it devolve into a corrupt autocratic state where political enemies are jailed or killed and the world's greatest military will be deployed within our own borders to racially cleanse our nation of immigrants, both legal and otherwise? That sums it up. And that is an extremely well-written, eloquent sentence. And when I read that, that's when I decided I was going to highlight this article for you guys. Again, this was written by Dr. Beast68 at dailykos.com, DAILYKOS. Our media systems, both corporate and independent, are committed to selling us this false equivalence between the two sides, framing the election as a close race, when in fact, he gets into some opinion, but he backs it up with data. I'll just say that at the beginning. When in fact, the chasm between the two visions for America could not be wider. The media thrives on the drama of competition, the narrative of a horse race, because it keeps readers and viewers engaged. It drives traffic, boosts advertising revenue, and sustains the endless cycle of speculation and commentary. But in doing so, they have abdicated their responsibility to the truth, and the public has been left confused and divided. There is a profit motive behind all media in the United States. There just is. There just is. And what's driving profits these days? Clicks and views. Manufacturing suspense. The reality is that this election is not a battle between two equally valid political ideologies. It is a stark confrontation between basic principles of good governance rooted in the Constitution and the wholesale destruction of that very foundation. Yet the media has continuously presented it as a legitimate contest, stoking fears of a too close to call outcome and capitalizing on the anxiety of undecided voters. The endless barrage of polls are tightening headlines and swing states are up for grabs, an exaggerated focus on the fringe candidates create the illusion that both sides are playing by the same rules. This framing ignores the existential threat posed by one side's willingness to subvert democratic institutions, disenfranchise voters, and reject the results of a legitimate election. Instead of clarifying these stakes, the media's profit-driven incentive has been to amplify the narrative of suspense, creating a psychological roller coaster for the electorate and an emotional roller coaster. And that emotional roller coaster fucking sucks. False equivalencies and clickbait democracy. At the heart of this issue is the false equivalency the media clings to out of either fear or backlash or in pursuit of clicks. In a normal political landscape, such neutrality may be understandable, but this is no ordinary moment in history. When one party endorses election-denying candidates, conspiracy theories, and political violence, treating both sides as if they are equally legitimate undermines the very democracy the media claims to serve. The click-driven model of journalism has poisoned our discourse, reducing nuanced debates about policy and governance to shallow arguments about personality and optics. Election coverage is less about what candidates will actually do if elected, and more about the spectacle of who won the latest debate or who has momentum in the polls. This superficial reporting not only distorts the reality of the stakes, but also demoralizes voters who see their legitimate concerns about democracy reduced to ratings fodder. The cost of distraction. And just think about the flawless versus lawless comment that I said a minute ago. The most dangerous outcome of this media-driven narrative is that it distracts from the real and urgent threats to the nation's future. Instead of focusing on policies that undermine the rule of law or dismantle civil rights, we are treated to endless punditry about electoral strategies and the latest gaffe. This election is not a contest of personalities or political preferences. It is a referendum on the Constitution and the principles of democracy and whether they will endure. But by treating it as just another election, the media has allowed dangerous ideas to creep into the mainstream without consequence. If you want to see a perfect example of this, just go to YouTube and Google Scott Jennings on CNN. He is a very close advisor to Mitch McConnell. He's one of their standard MAGA Republicans that CNN has on their 5-person panels to bring the other side to the argument. And every single fucking time he goes on the air, he lies. And CNN pays him hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to appear in those segments throughout the day and the evening on a daily basis on CNN, knowing ahead of time that he's going to go on their airways and lie. They know that he's going to do that. And they pay him to do that. Even now, the media plays a pivotal role in legitimizing those who reject the basic tenets of democracy by giving airtime to extremists, presenting misinformation without fact-checking, and they never push back on this guy, and failing to hold those who lie accountable. They've emboldened the very forces that seek to tear down our democratic institutions, and I would add, for a profit. This election should not be framed as a choice. I talked about that. A reckoning must come. The media cannot escape its culpability in the erosion of democratic norms. There must come a reckoning for those who have failed to stand up for the truth, who have chosen profit over principle, and who have treated this moment of existential threat as merely another news cycle. Journalism is supposed to serve the public, to inform and educate, not to entertain and exploit. In fact, while the media sells the story of a close, nail-biting election, the reality on the ground tells a different story. All right, so he makes some observations. He backs them up with data. I'm not rejecting or endorsing this. I'm still scared to death about this election. I keep saying he. I shouldn't do that. The author, however, does an excellent job of backing up their statements with data in the paragraphs that come. Polling stations are seeing record turnout. Early voting numbers are shattering expectations. True. And the enthusiasm gap between those who seek to preserve democracy and those who support its destruction is stark. I think that's also accurate. Far from being an evenly split electorate, a majority of Americans clearly understand the gravity of this election and are voting accordingly. God, I hope so. Numerous independent polls and data sources show overwhelming support for candidates who stand for democratic governance and reject autocracy. In battleground states and districts, early voting numbers and registration surges indicate that a large portion of the electorate has already decided, and they are voting in droves for stability, equality, and constitutional governance. The media's portrayal of a close race is not only misleading, it is dangerous in that it masks the real momentum on the ground. So Kamala Harris has signed up something like 500,000 volunteers for her campaign. Those are the people who are working the ground game in the swing states, knocking on doors, making sure that Democrats get out to vote, and trying to convince wobbly Republicans to vote for Kamala Harris instead of Donald Trump. Donald Trump contracted out his ground game to Charlie Kirk of Turning Points USA and to Elon Musk, and it's not working. So the ground game is going to be huge in this election. Kamala Harris has one. They've spent millions of dollars in building it. Donald Trump is paying other people who don't care whether he's elected or not to do his ground game. Kamala Harris's volunteers care about her and her campaign. There is a palpable sense that this election may, in fact, be a landslide for those defending the rule of law, and the media's focus on tightening polls and undecided voters is a disservice to the public. Again, I hope that's true. The media is also ignoring its own reporting. The surge in voter registrations, especially among young, black, and Latina voters, the number of registered Republicans who will vote for Harris in protest of what Trump has done to their party. Think Nikki Haley voters. Like, they're projecting that 7 to 9% of Republicans are going to vote for Kamala Harris. The number of veterans and those who respect our military who are disgusted with Trump's disrespect. And to top all of that, this will be the first presidential election since the Dobbs decision. And every other election so far since that horrific destruction of human rights in America has been a surprise to the media, whose polls woefully undercounted Democratic support and support for abortion rights. This election is not going to be close. Harris and Walz are going to win in a landslide. I hope so. The media will act surprised, as if no one could have seen it coming except for all of us telling them it was coming. This isn't speculation. It is supported by hard data. States like Georgia, Arizona, and Michigan, once considered swing states, are seeing unprecedented early voting numbers that favor Democratic candidates by wide margins. That, I don't know that that's true, because Republicans are voting early by huge numbers as well. But I hope it's true. While corporate media may choose to downplay this, independent analysts have pointed out the enthusiasm for maintaining democracy is overwhelmingly strong. That's accurate. From massive grassroots organizing efforts to voter mobilization campaigns, Americans are recognizing the stakes, and it's becoming clear that this election is less of a toss-up and more of a blue tsunami. God, I hope that's accurate. I really do. The media's failure to cover these realities creates a dangerous false narrative. Instead of reporting on the extraordinary wave of civic engagement, they choose to focus on sensationalist headlines that drive fear and uncertainty. That's absolutely accurate. This is no accident. It feeds their profit machine. But the outcome of this election may very well reveal a different story. One where the majority of Americans decisively reject extremism and reaffirm their commitment to democracy. The stakes are not just the outcome of this election. It is the survival of our republic. The media must be held accountable for the role it's playing today, and we as citizens must demand better. Without a functioning press committed to the truth, democracy cannot survive. It is time for a reckoning. I agree wholeheartedly. Thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing. Please comment and like and engage in the comments, and I will try to do the same. Thanks, everybody.